Hi, I'm Dorothea Oldham, and I'm a realtor here in Oregon. And this is my video about real estate adventures part 2. And I will tell you about the real estate when I got started in the 70s. And so I'll have a lot of information there, but I wasn't licensed. I was just buying and selling for our family. So I will tell you all about that. I think you'll enjoy it. So let's get started. So in my last video I told you about I met my husband while I was driving around with my little Mercedes. Actually there was a German village in Torrance, that's in Los Angeles, and they had a dance, and that's where we met. And there was this little village here. Actually I bought a t-shirt there. It said, "Kiss me, I'm German." It didn't go over too well sometimes. That was a cute little village, but I think they closed it now. At any rate, so we lived in Long Beach, California. There it is. And we had this little old house right here by the water, which was nice. And we actually were trying to get a permit to put this boat dock into the water. We put it in, but we could not convince the city of Long Beach to allow it. We had to take it back out and store it here in our vacant lot next door. So that was quite ridiculous. We had to sell it that way. But anyway, I went swimming there every day in the water, and so we were here next to the boat landing there, and our realtor lived right across the street. And he told us that in the 1930s, during the Depression, there were big banners here along the Oceanfront: "House for sale, $200, but nobody had $200. Yeah, and the prices were quite reasonable in the 70s still. It was just like 200,000 or so for our little adobe there. And but now look at the prices. It's a far cry from $200, I'm sure. Unbelievable. But so at that time it was still reasonable, and my husband was an investment mold maker, and he made them all by hand, not with CNC, and he made these high precision parts. And I delivered those molds all over Los Angeles with this old truck. This is we called it Betsy. It didn't have power steering or power brakes or power anything. It was an amazing truck. And so our little shop was in Garden Grove, and we lived down here, and Grandma lived in here somewhere. And so we were buying and selling real estate with our realtor across the street. He was retired, and so he gave us all the inside information and just called us when something good came on the market. We snagged it and then rented it out for a while and then sold it again. So, and I'm going to tell you all about that. Yeah, so when we bought our little house there on the peninsula, we bought it on a contract for deed. And we paid faithfully, and then we wanted to pay it off. We paid it off. And then, what about the title? So of course I was new to that real estate game. I wasn't licensed then. I was just doing our own stuff. So I said, well, what to do? So finally came to find out, when you pay off a loan, you need to get a deed of reconveyance. All foreign words to me. Well, now that was not that easy, because the previous owners, they now were very, very old, and they lived in Hawaii. and it was just a bear at that time. We didn't have email, we didn't have text, or barely a phone. I was sitting somewhere in the house, and so I had to get a Deed of Reconveyance, and then get that, and then record that, and then you get the title to the house. So that was our first adventure. Then we bought a condominium there in Long Beach, and that worked quite well. We rented that out, and so then of course you have the usual renter problems. You need to vet them, make sure they have enough money, and they have a paychecks, and do all this background check stuff. And you want to have due diligence. If you don't really check them out, the scumbags usually have great references, so you want to be very careful. Making sure you just cross all your T's. And nowadays, of course, you have this automated. You can just type it in somewhere and do a background check, so that is quite helpful. But in the olden days, you can easily fall into stuff like we did later in Port Orford. It was a nice couple, but then they didn't pay rent. And they were just a nightmare. They had the curtains closed all day, and we had to pay them to get out of there. What a disaster. So anyway, so we rented that out. That went very well. And then we got another condo and rented that out, and that went well. And then we bought a duplex, and so we had to renovate that, and I got to pick out all the colors, make sure it looks nice. And then at that time the interest rate was 18%, and I couldn't believe it. Somebody actually bought it at 18%. I saw him sign it. He said, "Oh my gosh." And we had a contract for deed. And then, of course, after a couple of years, he needed to come up with pay it off, and then get it refinanced conventionally. And or we had to sometimes we had to extend those contracts. And was quite interesting, because at that time real estate contracts were one page. It was legal size, 14 inches long, and everything you always wanted to know when you buy a house, it's right on there. Now you have 34 pages? Unbelievable. So nowadays, when you have a contract for deed, the collection agency is an escrow company. And it's called a trust deed. That's why it's called a trust deed. So they hold the title. And so then the buyer pays the escrow company, and the escrow company sends you the money without the fee. They keep a fee. But at that time, we were just collecting it ourselves. Send me the money, and then at that time we could also do wraparounds. If we owed money on something and then sold it, we had a lower interest rate loan, let's say 7%, and they paid 10%, which was a good deal at that time. Then they paid us the 10%, and we gave the 7% to the bank, and that was called a wraparound. And they don't really do that anymore. If you do, we have to bootleg it. So it's better to do the official route and have it collected by an escrow company. So then we bought a big piece of property out in Riverside, and hung on to that for a while. And one day I got a phone call will you exchange it for an avocado field in, I don't know, somewhere in California? Said, no, thank you, and hung up. So, well, maybe later. Should have at least thought about it or talked to my husband about it, but no. Anyway, we had that big field out in the middle of nowhere, and then a developer bought it, and they built houses. I think one house took 8 hours to put up. Or it's just an unbelievable speed. So that was that. But then, well, in the meantime, I had 2 boys, and we thought, well, we need to be out in the country. So where do we go? So first, we went to Hawaii. So maybe Hawaii is nice. So and we were taking a closer look at Kauai, and not sooner had we returned, a few days later, we were still kicking the possibility around, and a big tidal wave washed over the whole island. That was just a disaster. So, well, maybe Hawaii is out. So, what else can we do? How about, well, there was a little tiny ad in the Los Angeles Times, Oceanfront property in Port Orford, Oregon. So, well, that sounds interesting for $45,000. What can go wrong? So, we flew up there to Eugene, drove down. He says, oh yeah, that is beautiful. They had just sloping dunes down to the beach, and it was really pretty. Okay, let's buy it and fly back, because I had a nursing baby at home, so we didn't have time to look around any further. So now, but we had the business there in Southern California and grandma. So, oh my gosh, that took us a while to get organized. So first we had to replant grandma. We sold her house and then put her in a rental we had there across the water. And then what to do with the business. We had a good employee, and he lived out there in Corona. So we said, well, let's build a tilt up in Corona. So I designed the shop, and then we did a tilt up there. And I thought that was interesting. They just pour a big slab of concrete on the ground, and then they tilt it up, and there's your building. So we had to move over there, our shop and operation. In the meantime, we were also buying and selling machine tools. So when you saw in the picture, Bridgeports and lathes and pantographs, and I was flying all over the place looking at machinery. And that was quite interesting. So now we had the shop ready close by where our employee was, and we had all our holdings we needed to sell, and so then fly over to Port Orford. But that move cost us like $50,000 at that time, because we had to move all the machinery, the ones we are taking, up to Oregon, and of course the cats and the kids and grandma. Grandma had to get a house over there too. So so we had to buy another house over there in Port Orford for her to live in, and it got really quite complicated. And to take care of the kids, I wasn't doing deliveries anymore. I thought, well, I got to stay home with the kids. So then we decided to have au pair girls from Germany. So every year we had a different au pair girl from Germany, and I was trying to teach them how it goes over here, which is quite different. But at least I could speak German, and then we had also the governor's daughter from Finland came and worked with us for a while. And then there was the Olympics in Los Angeles, and that was exciting for those au pair girls, of course. And that was that story. So I like to add a note about living on the water with 2 little kids. For one thing, it was nice. We could walk early in the morning all around the peninsula and pick up all the toys that were left behind by the tourists. So that was fun. And but my firstborn, he just ran through the house, ran out in the yard, and threw whatever he had just found into the water, into the bay, across that big hedge there. Food processor parts, one shoe, always one shoe from each pair. So that was one pitfall. And then next door we didn't have the hedge, we just had a direct access to the bay. And so of course we went swimming over there with the boys. There, we had a fence between our lot and our vacant lot next door. But then, I went over there and the little boys were playing in the shallow water. And I just went into the house to get something. When I came back, one boy was disappeared and just splashing in the water. Actually, there was a deep drop-off. Just, after the shallow part, there was a deep drop-off and whoops, he disappeared. So I jumped in there and fished him back out. So luckily it was okay. And then the next door, there was that landing place. At that time, it was just all on a platform, on a wooden platform, and underneath were pilings. And so, of course, the boys disappeared in there and found crabs and things, and that was a lot of fun. But of course you were not supposed to do that. So one day the police boat came and with a loudspeaker chased our little boys out of there. Such criminals, but a start in life. So you want to be careful, of course. You know that when you buy a house next to the water. It has its pitfalls if you have little children, or if your dog can't swim. My daughter is just watching a dog that can't swim, so I'm going to be careful with that. Another difference between like Germany and the United States. We were living there on 55th Place, which had direct access to the sandy beach. There was the sand just blew around over there. So my mom came from Germany, and she said, "Well, who's supposed to sweep up all that sand there at the end of the road?" I said, "Well, I usually do that." Says, "Yeah, but there's a police car coming, and you haven't done that this morning." So, don't worry about it. It's okay. And another thing in Germany, you build everything very conform. Everything has to match with everything in the neighborhood. Well, not over here necessarily, unless you're in some subdivision with an HOA. But here, everybody builds a house the way they like to have their house, and paint it any color they like and put any roof on they like. And my mom was just flabbergasted. Are they allowed to do that? Every house is different. How come? Yeah, so there's another difference. Another thing, when I came over from Germany, it's very precise how you place your knife and fork. The knife, the cutting edge, has to face the plate, and fork has to be next to it or on the other side of the plate. Well, if you go to a restaurant here, you just give you silverware any which way. There was if you grow up with that high precision stuff and then you come here, anything goes, or people have a hole in their sweater. So, oh my gosh, how can you run around with a hole in your sweater? Yeah, so little differences like that. So now, since you found out that I made my real estate license officially, I'll invite you to read my books. They are for free on my website, rogueriverrealestate.com. And if you need any real estate anywhere in the country, I'll be happy to hit you up with a realtor that knows their stuff. So give me a call, send me a text, send me an email, and visit my website. Thank you for watching.